Hey, welcome back to Deep Dive Movie Reviews. I'm Steve Hackman, along with my colleague James March. We're going to be taking deep dive reviews into the movies you love. James, what do we have on deck for today?
This week we are talking The Matrix Resurrections, which is the fourth installment in the Matrix series, and the first for almost 20 years. This one picks up the action sometime after those events, where we find Neo now living under his old human name of Thomas Anderson in San Francisco as a video game developer, where he has no memory of all of the events that occurred, but rather is plying his trade, has developed a video game that is based on what he thinks are the dreams of the Matrix. So this is directed by Lana Wachowski, one half of the Wachowskis who conceived of this whole franchise. And it also brings back Keanu Reeves, Carrie-Anne Moss, as well as new additions like Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, Jessica Henwick, and many others.
Well, James, let me just ask then. I mean, this franchise has been going on for over 20 years. It's had some hits, it's had some misses. What baggage, what history do you bring to the franchise? Where have you gone with The Matrix?
Yeah, I mean, I was there day one. It came out pretty much the summer I graduated from university. So it was one of the last films I remember seeing in that town where I was at college before leaving, actually, right at the beginning of the summer of '99. And you know, there is no real way to overemphasize what a massive impact that film had. You know, it was really at a time where CGI hadn't completely taken over the genre. And one of the great things about the film is that it managed to do a lot of incredible and imaginative and innovative action and fight choreography, all in camera, all without the use of CGI, as is discussed in this new film. You know, they developed this concept of bullet time, which became their kind of signature motif. So I was there right at the start, and you know, it was something out of left field. It was something completely new. I think, like a lot of people, I was very excited to see where they went. You know, these two sequels came out in quick succession. If I remember right, they both came out the same year, like 6 months apart in 2003. But then, like a lot of people, I was pretty let down by those sequels as well. I think that they started emphasizing on the wrong elements of the story, the wrong elements of the franchise. I think that what the first film did so successfully, you know, beyond pushing this kind of cyberpunk aesthetic and this bullet time technology, is it took a really simple premise. You know, what if the real world is not the real world, but in some ways was actually, you know, more favorable, you know, than the reality? Which would you choose and why? And it used that as the engine for this sort of really exciting science fiction action film. I think in the films that followed, they lost sight of that, and they got too bogged down with the philosophy of different realities and all sorts. And I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah, no, I saw it pretty much close to day one. I remember 1999 here in Hong Kong. I went to go see it with my friend Francis. Came out, my mind was blown. And again, I come from the Christian. I was a Christian minister, and the Christian metaphor, I mean, it became within Christian circles to dissect the Matrix and find the Christian metaphors in that. I came out of that movie thinking that was the best Christian movie I'd ever seen in my life. Wow. I went back and I went back that night and watched it with my wife. I saw it 4 more times at the cinema. Every time somebody at my church, I'd find out they hadn't seen The Matrix yet, I'd get a group. I'm saying, I'm taking you to The Matrix. And that's how profound that movie was for me. I would put that first Matrix into my top 10 movies of all time. Like yourself, though, number 2 and 3, I was let down. Yes, there was some parts of it that worked for me, but by and large, I thought they lost the narrative. And like you said, they bogged down into a lot of philosophical discussions that, although I enjoy those, it started to become like something in a university course, and it was just
right.
It got to be too much, and so I was pleasantly surprised to see that Resurrections was coming along, was in production. The rumors had been out for years, and now we've seen it.
We have. Yeah, I mean, I think I felt the same way. I mean, those sequels just became far more philosophical debates and ruminations rather than sci-fi action movies, which at the end of the day is what The Matrix was supposed to be all about and what they built its name on. Yeah, so here we are now, almost 20 years on, and we have another one. You know, I know almost immediately Warner Brothers, the studio behind it, they wanted to do more, sure. And they were pushing the Wachowskis to do another one, and for a long time. Apparently, every year they would come to them and say, "Let's do one more," and they would say, "No, don't want to do any more. We've done it. The story's not." And you know, they had other things going on. They were doing other films. They were on some very, very specific personal journeys, the pair of them as well. And I think they just really felt, you know what, we've done enough. And I feel, and I think this is very relevant, I feel that only when they sensed that Warner Brothers were going to go ahead and do it with or without them, you know, they got a script developed by Zach Penn, who'd been involved in some other movies. I think he'd done some DC, written some DC movies, that they felt, okay, this is in danger of leaving our hands completely, you know, being taken away from us. So it kind of, let's do it before someone else takes over and wrecks it. Right. So we only have one of the Wachowskis on board here, Lana, but Lily gave the film her blessing. It's not like, I don't think there was any kind of sort of dispute over one of them wanting to do it and the other one not. I think just Lily is committed elsewhere. Yeah. And then the other controversy I think going in is the recasting of some of the major parts. You've got Yahya Abdul-Mateen coming in as Morpheus, and Lawrence Fishburne, who previously played the part, saying that he wasn't asked, he wasn't invited back. Right. And if I'm going to be brutally honest, I can see why. He's not in the same shape at all that he was 20 years ago.
He's become quite a big guy.
He's got big. You know, it's great. He still works with Keanu Reeves quite a lot in the John Wick franchise, and that's an interesting franchise because that is very much morphed out of the Matrix franchise. Because the guys who directed the John Wick franchise, David Leitch and Chad Stahelski, were the stunt coordinators of the original Matrix, and that's how Keanu Reeves got to know them. And actually, Chad Stahelski plays Handsome Chad. Right. Yep, Trinity's like Matrix husband. Yeah. So that's a nice little cameo in there. And so they've gone ahead and they've had to sort of find a new angle and a new take. And well, what do you think of this new angle that they've?
Well, I thought he was an excellent Morpheus. I mean, to me they were going for the Lawrence Fishburne lookalike in his 30s, and they found it. You know, he's got the deep, gravelly voice. He exudes Lawrence Fishburne as we would have imagined him, you know, 30 years ago. And so I thought that was fine. What I probably had an issue with, as much as I enjoyed Jonathan Groff, who played the English King in Hamilton, and now he's been recast as the new Agent Smith. To me, Hugo Weaving is so identified in that role. To not have Hugo Weaving, and my understanding was there was a scheduling conflict with Hugo Weaving. That's what I heard. Yeah. And I'm thinking scheduling conflicts can be sorted out. You need Hugo Weaving in this movie. I needed him going, Mr. Anderson, you know, whereas Jonathan Groff, I thought he did a fine job, but it didn't bring that same level of, it almost didn't feel like Agent Smith anymore. Even though they went to great pains to let us know this is Agent Smith, there's still something lost in the translation there for me.
Yeah, there's something very self-conscious about the film and how it presents itself. You know, because it seems to sort of it takes on board all of the behind-the-scenes machinations that have been going on and funnels them actually into the narrative. So, you know, we have this situation where Keanu Reeves' character, Anderson, is working for a company called Deus Machina in San Francisco that has had great success with this trilogy of video games they created, like immersive in-world video games called The Matrix, you know, which essentially, unbeknownst to him, subconsciously or unconsciously, he has essentially created a game out of what we know to be the trilogy of the Matrix films. And now there is pressure from Deus Machina's parent company, Warner Brothers, which is actually name checked in the film, to do more. And you feel, and so here you can plainly see that what Lana Wachowski is doing is she's writing into the script the problem that she is facing in the real world. Right. It's like she is being forced to do more. She can't get some of the actors back, or for one reason or another. Hugo Weaving, it was scheduling conflict. Lawrence Fishburne, just the way the age he is and the size he is now, it doesn't make sense for him to be a computer generated character. You can't excuse that. Mm-hmm. So they've had to make these adjustments and amendments and updates to the Matrix. It's Matrix 2.0 even within the narrative of the film.
Yeah, I love the self-awareness that you mentioned. The constant references to even how some of the game has been received better than other parts of the game, which of course what we were just saying about Matrix 1 versus Matrix 2 or 3. So it's very self-aware in this movie, and that was part of the fun, is if you've been along for the journey. It's almost like we said in Spider-Man last week, our review of Spider-Man, the level of which you have engaged in the Matrix over the last 22 years, you're going to get that much more out of it, because there's going to be Easter eggs and references made that will only be picked up by people who've been on the journey of this franchise since the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very generous way of looking at it. Because there's one way where you're like,
I'm a generous guy. Hey,
yeah, it's very self-aware and it's self-knowing, and that helps you. It helps bring you into the journey, if you like, as a fan. It's also, dare I say, kind of scapegoating the compromises, and the commercial realities of the fact that this movie exists at all.
Yeah,
I think. And for me, coming to this film after so long, my biggest question is, what are you going to do, Lana Wachowski and Keanu Reeves and everybody involved, to make this movie feel relevant and legitimate and justified? Particularly, I mean, I would almost at this stage be more accepting of just a complete overhaul reboot.
Right.
Because I'm like, sure, we get the idea that the studio just wants to squeeze as much money out of a property as possible. That I get. It's terrible, but that's the reality. But when you're bringing back the same people so many years later, you have to really earn it. Mm-hmm. Particularly when you're using a story which involves sort of the Matrix, virtual reality, computer generated, arguably better, more idealized versions of oneself. Mm-hmm. And then you've got these actors in their 50s kind of clunking their way around the screen. And fair play, Keanu Reeves is phenomenal, and Carrie-Anne Moss is great. They both look fantastic.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it raises the question: what justification is there for this film? Did you earn it? And when they present the story, there are elements of the story that I feel are very personal to Lana Wachowski, and she has certainly made the story. She's justified it to herself, and I think that's fine. But I think in terms of it being a sequel to The Matrix, to this science fiction, action, speculative, big ideaed science fiction franchise, I'm not sure that they bring enough to the table to make the whole endeavor worthwhile. Mm-hmm. So the things, what I did appreciate, she has laid bare in the script her struggles with, do I do this or do I not do this? She's actually written that into the story, as we've discussed. And I think the other big theme is her own personal journey. We know that she's a trans woman and that she has been through, this sort of journey of gender reassignment over the last sort of 20 years, really, as with the franchise. And so you have this really strong theme put prominently in the film about rejecting the notion of a binary world.
Yes.
Where all you have is good and evil, black and white, yes or no, red pill, blue pill. And it's not saying that those are sort of evil choices. It's just saying that there are more choices.
Yes.
And the mantra of the film is all about free will, choice, freedom, not being confined to a box, not being stuck in a chamber where you're told how you should be represented or how you should represent yourself. You have and as they say at the end of the film, let's paint the sky with rainbows.
Well, that's one of the reasons I enjoyed this movie, and we're getting into that, how we actually feel about it. In that, there was the one scene where Niobe says to Keanu Reeves, there's no more us and them. Them became part of us, and now we're we, like the machines and us. Some of the machines, hey, there's bad humans, there's good humans, there's bad machines, there's good machines. And so rather than having that binary, we're the humans, we're the good guys, the machines, those are the bad guys. We've created more choices. It's not binary, it's not either or. And that for me is something that I really appreciated in the movie, because I was going into it wanting to recapture some of what I felt in that first movie. My expectations were lowered. I knew nothing was going to give me that first kiss, that first time you see the Matrix. But I wanted something that was going to challenge and affirm kind of some philosophies I've been kind of toying with in my head, of the whole binary notions of in, out, us, them, right, wrong, good, evil. As I said in the Spider-Man review, I really enjoy those kinds of discussions on the nature of evil and good. And this movie conveyed some of those ideas, I thought, in a very fun way. And let me just end that thought by saying what I loved is they gave us a bit of the philosophy, but they didn't go into that deep dive where I just felt like I've just read a textbook for the last 2 hours, which is what 2 and 3 tended to do. It just got into this textbook philosophy, whereas this was fun movie philosophy. It gave us some concepts and ideas to explore, but it wasn't overwhelming or replaced the fun you're supposed to have in a film.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there was none of that sort of impenetrable philosophizing that you got with those long conversations between Neo and the architect.
Yes.
Which was supposed to be like the big culmination of that trilogy. The whole ending was this long, dreary conversation. You're like, I'm lost and I don't care. Yeah. Is this supposed to be what? You've done this 6 times before or what? And there was all this, and it really sort of ground to a halt and hit a brick wall. Here, there's plenty of philosophizing in the film, but like you say, it's movie philosophy, and in keeping with the theme of the philosophy, it's very inclusive. It brings the audience in. It keeps the language simple,
right?
And it keeps the idea simple. But I think I do have an issue, and my issue is, as great as all that is, and as applaudable as it is that Wachowski was able to create such a big mainstream platform, to use it to really work through, I think, a number of her own feelings and issues and philosophies and what have you, questions of identity. I felt that it happened at the expense of a propulsive science fiction thriller. And at the end of the day, if you cannot balance those two things, then I think you owe it to the audience to be the science fiction film, right, rather than the philosophy.
Where do you think it failed as a science fiction film? Because I would have thought that it pretty much ticked my boxes. There's a few issues I have, which I'll mention in a minute. But
okay. Yeah. I just felt that there wasn't nearly enough action in it. I felt there wasn't much of a plot, really. And what plot there was essentially just repackaging the first movie over again, in a very self-conscious way, kind of going, remember, we've done this before, but let's do it exactly the same again. And it does that a lot, where there are scenes that play out against backdrops of the same scene playing out from an earlier film. Yeah. And you're like, you can't just do that and get away with it. You gotta go, hey, look, we're going to do the same thing again and expect us to be okay with it if it's not just being a remake. And I felt, there was very little real action. A couple of fight sequences worked okay, but I also felt that the real world stuff, within, you got the city of Io, but it felt very small in comparison to what had been built up in the previous films. The whole scale of it, and the fact that there is this sort of fragile but seems to be constructive harmony existing between the humans and the machines in I want to say in the future, but it's like in the reality.
See, I liked the new Io because, to be honest, in the second movie, when we finally get to see Zion, and they're having this huge rave party, and I remember thinking,
I mean, that is ridiculous.
I'm starting to think that I'm going to side with the machines on this one. maybe humans should be wiped out, because this is a little weird.
It was incredibly obnoxious. Yeah.
I just thought the whole Zion, not even just the rave, but just the way people interacted there, I just after the first movie, I was thinking, oh, Zion would be a great place, the city, and it was kind of held up there. Then when we get to see it, it was like, oh, and it's not just because
it's like Burning Man or something.
Yeah, it was just nobody there is like really worthwhile. And when we see Io, you see that there is this humanity that's trying to develop and trying to create crops and growing strawberries again. Like there's this. It's not this hedonistic world, the city. It's a city that is looking to progress, to move forward, to include our former enemies as our friends and grow a world together. So Io worked for me.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, because Zion was full of just terrible people. There are the terrible people who it's like when you're given an ounce of freedom, all you want to do is rave all day, and it's like, well, that's not realistic. And then the other characters, or they were just sort of wrestling for control, and they were just power hungry the whole time. And yes, all of those are wrong, but I think that it was trying to say something about just a human instinct for power. And for control, and that we do like an element of control, which is one of the things that the analyst was talking about. He was like, people don't want in this film. He was like, people don't want freedom. They actually want to be told what to do. They don't want infinite choices.
Right.
But at least there was a sense that there was a community, and there was a society in need of saving. Yeah. In Io, there's like 3 people. Yeah. There's Niobe in some ridiculous aging makeup, but I guess they've already established it 60 years later. So if you're going to get Jada Pinkett Smith back, what are you going to do? And then there's an interesting idea, which is that in order to live a better life, they're essentially or strawberry picking, I should say, elements of the Matrix, but pulling it back in, because they've created this sort of synthesized food, in coalition with the machines, but that's just using a bit of the Matrix again. It's not real food, right. It's synthesized food, and it's just to give them the impression that they're eating something better. And you're like, well, that was the Matrix. That was what was wrong with the Matrix. The Matrix was kidding you into believing that you were leading your best life, and you had everything that you needed. But in fact, you didn't. So I never got the sense that there was a society to be saved, really.
Right.
There was just one, slightly deluded ideologue, and that was about it. So the scale of it, when you're in San Francisco in the Matrix, that all looked gorgeous, and I actually quite appreciated the shift in aesthetic. The trilogy all have this. They had a genre defining aesthetic. This kind of green tinged, cyberpunk, PVC clad sort of neo noir thing. And it was all sleek blacks and silvers and grays and greens. And here they've gone completely the other way, and it's just really vibrant, ultra HD kind of color palette.
Yeah,
and again, I felt that tied in with Wachowski's message of all the colors of the rainbow kind of thing.
Right.
And it shouldn't be this muted color palette. The world is full of bright color, and we should celebrate that.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. I hadn't thought about along those lines. One of the things that didn't work for me though was I thought the soundtrack could have been better and could have been used better, because I remember what really I enjoyed in the first movie was, when Neo and Morpheus fight, and there's that scene where suddenly it really kicks in, and then that pounding music just starts and just gets you goosebumps, and then everybody's racing around the ship. Hey, Neo and Morpheus are fighting, and they're
your weakness is not your technique.
Morpheus is fighting Neo.
It really got you going. I kept thinking through that Morpheus Neo recreated battle, like, oh, they're gonna pop the music in any minute now. Neo's gonna jump up, and then the music's really gonna start. And it never did. It was just kind of this background music. And a lot of times in the first movie, when they would enter the Matrix, they would have like really cool music playing that just kind of went with these super looking, they really always contrasted how drab they looked in the real world, and then how decked out they'd be in the new. And I just found that the music, until the last at the end when they fly away, which they finally kicked in some good music, then I just kept waiting, where's the good music in this movie? And I don't know if they had a budget problem, they couldn't get Rage Against the Machine again, or what the issue was, but I was disappointed in the soundtrack.
Yeah, no, the soundtrack was it was almost non-existent. I mean, obviously there was one, but I it's not memorable at all. It has that sort of signature theme,
yes,
from at the beginning of the film, but beyond that, I couldn't really remember. And that great use of Jefferson Airplane, actually, White Rabbit, which was in the trailer, and apparently Jefferson Airplane were, I just read this on Wikipedia, but they were founded in San Francisco at a nightclub called the Matrix in like the late 60s, and to have the fact that their signature song is also called White Rabbit,
right,
which ties in so strongly with the themes of the film. It was some very happy coincidence there. But I felt it was the score was really lacking. What I did like were some of the new supporting characters.
I was just going there.
In particular, I thought Jessica Henwick as Bugs is the most interesting part of the movie. Best thing in it. I was like, this is great. I know she's come through some TV and she's had a few bit parts and things, but if she doesn't get like lead roles after this, then there is no justice in the world.
I looked her up on Wikipedia soon after I got out of the cinema. Absolutely, she shined. I have to admit, I think I have a bit of a crush on her, and
sure.
She was a really outstanding part of this, like you said. And I kind of saw where she'd been, and I thought, oh, I think I have seen her in a couple TV shows before. But agreed, that was a casting coup right there, because she
Absolutely.
really, it was really good too, because you mentioned how, as good as Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss are, at the end of the day, they're still in their late 50s now. And it was nice to get, some of the younger, Jonathan Groff, Yahya Abdul, the new Morpheus, and Jessica Henwick, these younger people to kind of take up the slack of the heavy duty lifting of the fighting, because they do actually most of the fighting in this.
Yeah, this is it. And it's kind of obvious. I mean, I just thought, she was great, in a cast of sort of icons, really, where she is arguably, her character isn't all that important. Certainly at the beginning of the film, when she's introduced, you're like, I have no investment in you as a character, but she immediately draws your attention.
Yeah.
And it's not just because she's, easy on the eye, which obviously she is, but she has this very striking look when she's in the Matrix with the bright, is it blue hair?
Yes.
And those shades, and it's a great, but she's got such
it worked for me.
it totally worked. Yeah. But she just had a real confidence.
Yeah.
And a real charisma. She really held the screen and could convey emotion in just sort of the twitch of a cheek muscle kind of thing. And that's not easy, it's particularly for someone who's still on their way up. quite often they can stand there and look a little bit inert, and they're just nervous within the surrounding of the scale of the project. But she just owns it completely.
Yeah.
Swaggers through the screen, just telling everybody what to do. Her character obviously does become more important. She actually becomes kind of a catalyst for the climax in a way, and helping Trinity be rescued. But yeah, no, I just came away going, oh yeah, she's fab. And she almost didn't do it either. Apparently, she had this real. She was quite vocal about it recently that I think it was with her agency or someone. They said you can either go up for this or you can go up for Shang-Chi, but you cannot do both. We won't let you even audition for both.
Yeah,
which I think is that.
She said she had a red pill, blue pill decision to make.
Yeah, and I don't blame it. And it's amazing. I mean, I can see why she went this way, but when there's a Marvel movie being dangled in front of you, that's hard to turn down these days.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's one, who knows if this was her line of thinking at all, but she could, maybe she was thinking, well, I could be, one in a cast of Asians, or I could be the one Asian in the cast. And maybe that's what, or just the fact that it's the Matrix and it's proven, and Shang-Chi looked like a bit of a gamble, even in the Marvel universe. So, well, I think she made the right choice. I mean, regardless of what role she might have landed in Shang-Chi, it would have either been Awkwafina's role or the sister, I imagine, are the two roles she would have gone up for. I think this was a great part for her, and she, completely, she's far and away, the best thing about the film, I think.
Agreed. She is, as much as I enjoy Keanu Reeves, he kind of mumbles through the first half of this movie.
Oh, I thought you were going to say through his career.
No, yeah. And Carrie-Anne Moss is good, and she's looking great for age. But again, she doesn't even really get into any fights or anything worth of note until the last half of the film. Yeah,
and even then, I think the camera and the framing are very forgiving.
Yes, I'm gonna punch, and you make it look faster than I'm really doing this.
For sure.
What do you think of Neil Patrick Harris? What does he bring?
He's fun. He has this very sort of sly twinkle in his eye. We've seen him. There's a sort of cheeky, untrustworthy kind of scheming malevolence behind his eyes. I thought he was very well cast and did a lot with what he was given. I thought he was actually pretty good.
He's always enjoyable to watch, and those blue glasses he was wearing. Again, like Jessica Henwick's blue shades. They were definitely going for a color scheme here, and I really enjoyed him as a character. And that was probably the biggest spoiler in the film, is to find out that his therapist is really the analyst. And right. I did like the inverted bullet time, where it said, oh, we needed a new bullet time, so this is what it is. And again, that self-aware that the best thing that came out of, or one of the highlights that came out of the original Matrix trilogy, is the bullet time special effect. And then, of course, they reference it in the game that he created, and that how we need a new bullet time. We need something that's going to, people are going to come away from this. And when
do you think they did come up with something that it is as striking and would be as memorable?
It's not as striking, because the bullet time was something that obviously has been copied now in various incarnations. Whereas slowing down time, that's been done since Star Trek, the original series, had an episode of that. But it's and every X-Men has got the guy that can move very fast, so everything else is slowed down. Yeah. So, but it was fun to watch. I thought it was done well. The fire the bullet. Neil Patrick Harris is just continuing to talk as this bullet slowly going across the room, and he puts the apple in front of it. And
that was a nice touch.
Yeah, it was. I thought here's the thing for me, James, is that when they started to get really CGI heavy in the last battle, I actually started to nod off. That's where I get bored, is in CGI heavy battles, because and this is where another thing or another critique I have of the second and third movie. After the second and third movie, I said Agent Smith is terrifying, and the Wachowski brothers, I feel sometimes veer into the territory where George Lucas has really set his mark, and that, oh, if we're going to do a sequel, you know what's scarier than one Agent Smith? It's not two Agent Smiths or five Agent Smiths. It's a bazillion, gazillion Agent Smiths. And for me, every time they go into that kind of territory, it just becomes a cartoon. All the stakes have lowered for me. There's no investment in that. When Neo just started fighting Agent Smiths ad nauseum in the sequels, I got bored. Give me one Smith. That's interesting to watch.
Right.
Maybe two or three. And they kind of went into that territory. You know, I love the idea of the swarm, that we can swarm.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of worked for me. But then after it's played out a few times and I'm just seeing swarm after swarm, I know that we're supposed to suspend reality in watching these movies, but you can only stretch that so far before it snaps. And you're like, I have no emotional investment in this fight anymore. I wouldn't say it got to that level, but I was starting to get bored with that final battle.
Yeah, no, I think the swarm was a great idea, you know, and when they're on the train, I think you get a glimpse of kind of, there's a Train to Busan style moment where that they take over all of the passengers in the train, and suddenly they're all coming at you at once. And then obviously it builds to the end where you've got all the police and what have you. But I felt that they struck upon a good idea and then they didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of the problem, is that, wouldn't it be great if we could take over everybody at once?
Yeah.
And it's like, now do something cool with it. And I don't think they ever did. You know?
Well, they did when they started throwing people out of the window and trying to bomb them when they were on the motorcycle. That was pretty wild.
Yeah, it's just sort of human cannonballs kind of thing, coming down. That was fun. That was interesting. That actually reminded me, if I'm going to get really nerdy about it, of something that I saw exactly the same in another Korean movie but it was only about 6 months ago. So I don't know if they quite had time to have seen it. It was called The Cursed, and I think it was a spin-off of a Korean TV show. And the same thing happens. There's kind of like a plague of zombies chasing a guy up a building, and then when they run out of the building, they kind of throw themselves all out of the window, like to try and bomb him. But it was so recently that I'm not sure if the Wachowskis would have had time to have seen that and gone, oh, okay. And we know that they watch a lot of kind of Korean movies and that, because the influence does come in. I think in the train sequence, there's a definite kind of Train to Busan vibe about that sequence. But that's what that reminded me of. And I think they could have pursued that kind of thing a little bit more.
Yes, they could have. I agree. I did like the camera work with them moving on the train through different doors. Even when that missile gets fired at them, goes into the train. There was some really cool special effects. I love when that CGI is used to just enhance rather than to overwhelm.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, because that started in the opening sequence when they're going through doors, and then the doors are at sort of 90-degree angles to each other. You know, the room they go into, and I thought, but again, I thought, there's a really cool chase scene to be had here. Going through doors, and as you go through each one, and they kind of touch on it, and just as you're like, oh, this is going to be a good sequence, it's over, and it doesn't go anywhere. And I felt that there was too much of that, and I think that the film as a whole was glimpses of decent ideas, but too few of them were kind of developed. And instead, the film emphasized on other things that I don't think necessarily should have been at the forefront, should have been the priority. It could have remained more allegorical and more like in the subconscious, if you like.
Indeed. I did like the ending and having Trinity be the one to fly. That was a nice little touch.
Sure, yeah. I like the idea that only together are they strong enough to do anything. And it does suggest that they might do another one, but I worry that will it just be another reworking of those misguided sequels that we've already seen, albeit with Trinity as more of a focus. So
that's a dilemma. See, that's the dilemma that the Matrix has in sequels, is even though it theoretically is a big wide open world, it's kind of contained itself within a certain story narrative. And it's kind of hard to surprise people because the nature of the narrative lends itself to, I know what's going to come because I know how this plays out. It's almost like watching an M. Night Shyamalan movie. And, the first 2 or 3 are great because they have that twist, but then it becomes, okay, now we know we have to look for the twist. And you actually lose the enjoyment of the movie looking for the twist. And I feel that The Matrix can suffer from this if they do another sequel, where they have to try to come up with something really original. But the nature of the narrative itself doesn't really allow for it. So I'm a little nervous about it. I'd almost say let's just leave it to rest. You've kind of redeemed yourself from 2 and 3, and this will be a good. Okay, are we? Should we go into a final score here? Or do you have anything?
Sure. Let's do it. Let's do it.
So, James, what are your final thoughts and your final score? Let's give it out of 5. What
were they? Resurrection pods?
Yes. How many resurrection pods?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I was open to the idea of going back to The Matrix, to coin a phrase, but I don't feel it was adequately justified. I don't think that they furthered the story enough in any meaningful way for this to be worthwhile. I think it attempts to get out of the reality that it's just a their hand has been forced and it's a cash grab by acknowledging it on screen. I don't think you can get away with it that easily. But I do feel that visually it was always interesting. It was different, but it was always interesting, and that's always been a big part of the franchise. I don't think it was quite as innovative or influential as the first one, but hey, it's hard to follow up on like the most influential sci-fi movie of the last 30 years, whatever. But I do, if nothing else, it's a great showcase for Jessica Henwick. I really think that she stole the movie out from everybody, and even the other characters that did well, like Yahya Abdul-Mateen, who disappears halfway through the movie, and Jonathan Groff, and even Neil Patrick Harris. I don't think they had enough time to shine, really. Right. I think they did fine with what they had, but I don't think they had enough time to shine. So I came away very disappointed, feeling that my kind of time had been wasted. I was like, why did I don't see the point, quite frankly, beyond the commercial reasons, and it was all a bit of a waste of my time, quite honestly.
So your score?
So I'm going to give it 2.
Ouch.
2 resurrection pods.
Wow. I think this is probably the biggest divergent views we've had, because I certainly can't give this a 5 by any stretch. It has too many holes in it for me, as I'd mentioned, and I didn't come quite out of it with that spring in my step like I did last week for Spider-Man. So I'm going to give this, I was going to give it 3.5, but with Jessica Henwick's performance, I'm going up to 4.
Wow.
Because I thought this was a fun movie. I disagree with your thought in that there was no justification for this. I thought there was enough story there to justify bringing this band back together again. And I liked the self-deprecating, self-referencing. I thought it was like I said, it was self-deprecating, and I enjoyed its self-awareness. So yeah, my final score: go see it. It's a fun ride. 4 resurrection pods out of 5.
Wow. All righty.
All right. Well, till next week, James.
Yeah, I think it'll be the new year, probably, won't it? So.
Yes. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, ding that bell, because we love doing these videos and these reviews, but we really want more people to be commenting and being part of the conversation.
Absolutely. And let us know what you want us to talk about as well. We will happily take requests.
Sounds good. And it is 2 days till Christmas. So Merry Christmas, James.
Merry Christmas, Steve. And Merry Christmas, everyone.
And God bless us, everyone.